Can Serraj-Haftar become national heroes to end war in Libya? Libya's High Council of State and the Government of National Accord, GNA, welcomed Turkey and Russia's call to reach a ceasefire in the country, reports said Thursday. The High Council of State welcomes the statement made by President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and Russian President Vladimir Putin regarding the Libyan crisis and the attack on the capital, a statement released by the Council said. The statement added that it fully supports all initiatives ensuring the protection of Libyan people's lives and strives to stop the war. The Council also noted that any calls for dialogue need to adhere to the Skhirat agreement signed by different political factions in Morocco in December 2015. Libya's High Council of State, an executive and advisory body, was formed as part of the Libyan Political Agreement, Skhirat Agreement, signed on December 17, 2015 in Skhirat, Morocco to end the civil war in the country under the guidance of the United Nations. The GNA also said in a statement that it welcomed the call, saying they want peace, security, and protection of the national unity of Libya and believe there's a political solution for the crisis. The statement continued by saying that the GNA is waging a war of defense against those who attack it to obstruct the democratic transition process and the countries that support the forces. We welcome all initiatives to relaunch the political solution process and end the war as envisaged in the Skhirat Agreement, and we fully support the Berlin Conference that will be held under the auspices of the United Nations, the GNA added. It also confirmed that the Libyan crisis should only be solved through political means. Erdogan and Putin will call for reaching a ceasefire in Libya by midnight on January 12, Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu said Wednesday in a joint news conference with Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov. We have decided to take the initiative and, as intermediaries, we call on all parties in Libya to stop hostilities as of midnight on January 12, declaring a sustainable ceasefire, supported by the necessary measures to be taken for stabilizing the situation on the ground and normalizing daily life in Tripoli and other cities, and immediately coming together around a negotiating table with a view to putting an end to the sufferings of the Libyan people and bring back peace and prosperity to the country, a joint statement issued by the two leaders said. Speaking Thursday, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan reiterated that Turkey will continue to defend its rights and interests in the Mediterranean, adding that Turkish troops are in Libya to bring an end to the injustice and oppression. Libyan Premier al-Serraj to hold talks in Brussels. The EU also pledged to make efforts toward a peaceful and political solution for the Libyan conflict after the visit of the leader of Libya's UN recognized GNA to Brussels. EU Council President Charles Michel and the EU's High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy Josep Borrell discussed the recent developments in Libya with Libyan Prime Minister Fayez al-Sarraj Tuesday. The EU leaders repeated the bloc's position on rejecting all kinds of military solutions and foreign interference in the conflict, stressing that it's the Libyan people who need to determine their future, and only a political process can bring peace and stability closer. Michel reiterated the EU's position on the Turkey-Libya Pact on maritime boundaries in the eastern Mediterranean as well. According to the EU, the memorandum does not have any legal consequences for the internal community because it infringes on the sovereignty of other states and does not comply with the internationally recognized law of the sea. As the legitimate government, we have the right to reach a memorandum of understanding with any country, said al-Sarraj. Al-Sarraj held separate discussions with the EU Parliament President David Sassoli. Michel will visit President Recep Tayyip Erdogan on January 11 in Istanbul to discuss the situation in Libya. He will continue his diplomatic tour and meet Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. Libya and Turkey signed agreements in November outlining cooperation in terms of security and maritime affairs, angering Mediterranean countries, including Greece and the Greek Cypriot administration, of whom the diplomatic maneuver prevents from unilaterally exploiting energy resources in the region. Last week, Turkey's parliament passed a motion allowing the government to send troops to Libya. The decision was criticized by various EU actors in the past few days. High Representative Borrell called it a foreign interference in the conflict that the EU rejects. Libya's GNA recently made a formal request for air, ground, and sea support from the Turkish military to help fend off an offensive from the forces of General Khalifa Haftar, who is attempting to take control of the capital, Tripoli. Turkey supports the UN-backed government against the militia and mercenaries of the latter self-proclaimed military chief. In April, Haftar's forces launched a military campaign to capture Tripoli from the internationally recognized government. Haftar announced on December 12 that he had ordered militants to launch a decisive battle to capture the city. More than 280 civilians and 2,000 fighters have been killed since the beginning of Haftar's assault on Tripoli, according to the United Nations. The fighting has displaced some 146,000 people, with the ongoing violence threatening to plunge Libya into violent chaos to rival the 2011 conflict that led to the ousting and murder of longtime dictator Muammar Gaddafi. Ankara is joined by Italy and Qatar in supporting Prime Minister Fayez al-Sarraj's legitimate government in Tripoli. Meanwhile, the rival force based in the east is supported by France, Russia, Jordan, and the United Arab Emirates, alongside other key Arab countries. Since the ousting of late leader Gaddafi in 2011, two seats of power have emerged in Libya, Haftar in eastern Libya supported mainly by Egypt and the United Arab Emirates, and the GNA in the capital Tripoli, which enjoys UN and international recognition. Haftar forces bombard Souk al-Juma district. In a recent attempt, militias loyal to eastern Libya commander Haftar launched artillery and missile strikes in the capital Tripoli's Souk al-Juma district early Thursday. Since early evening, a number of strong explosions have been heard in the area, which is close to Tripoli's only civilian airport, Midiga. Witnesses said Souk al-Juma was hit with many missiles, but there have been no statements issued on whether there are casualties. Haftar's Libyan National Army, LNA, meanwhile announced the expansion of the no-fly zone to include Midiga Airport. The LNA General Staff declared the expansion of the previously established no-fly zone in Tripoli, which includes the airport of Midiga starting from 5 p.m. Wednesday, 1500 hours o'clock GMT, LNA spokesman Ahmed Al-Mismari said in a statement posted on his Facebook page. Al-Mismari warned airlines to respect the boundaries of the no-fly zone and not to put their planes at risk of being destroyed. Speaking to Yeni Safak Daily, GNA Colonel Adel Abdul Kafai gave information about the latest situation in Haftar forces offense targeting Sirte. We fought for 8 months to take Sirte from Daesh and 700 of us were martyred. Therefore, we won't give Sirte to Haftar, we will take it back. The warlord Haftar, backed by Egypt and the UAE, has made significant advances in recent weeks. Regional actors meet to discuss Turkey-Libya deal. Meanwhile, France, Greece, Egypt and Cyprus Wednesday declared null and void agreements between Ankara and Libya assigning Turkey rights over a vast area of the eastern Mediterranean. A statement issued by the foreign ministers of the four countries, who met in Cairo, said the controversial agreements undermined regional stability. Their Italian counterpart, who also took part in the meeting, did not sign the statement. On the same day, Italian Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte received Eastern Libyan commander Haftar, whose forces are attempting to overthrow Libya's UN-recognized government. Haftar met Conte in Rome and the two held discussions for a couple of hours, according to Italian media reports. However, Italian authorities are yet to issue a statement regarding the content of the meeting. For the last 4 weeks, the Libyan capital of Tripoli has been the latest battlefield in Libya's on and off war of the past 5 years. However, this time it is very different. It is on a much larger scale than ever before and for very different motives. Khalifa Haftar's forces marched all the way from Benghazi to take over and force his role on Libya and become its dictator at large. In February 2014, Haftar attempted a coup d'état against the first elected parliament in Libya, the General National Congress. This failed coup led to Libya dawn, a battle that was fought in Tripoli to expel the factions that supported Haftar's coup d'état out of the international airport and other major installations within the capital. During that battle, United Arab Emirates, UAE, airplanes attacked the Libya Dawn fighters in Tripoli in what was a clear violation of Libya's sovereignty and international laws, leaving tens of casualties. Haftar then shifted his focus to the east of the country and started his Operation Dignity campaign. He attacked Benghazi under the pretense of fighting terrorism. This war continued for more than 4 years and resulted in the killing of more than 10,000 people, with most civilian casualties. His Operation Dignity resulted in the destruction of nearly 30% of the city, and more than 250,000 of Benghazi's residents fled the city. The majority sought refuge in the west in Misrata and Tripoli. The war on Benghazi allowed Haftar to take control of most of the eastern part of the country. His war campaign was carried out with extensive military and financial support from regional countries, namely the UAE, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia, as well as several major powers such as France and Russia. In fact, French soldiers fought alongside Haftar's forces and several were killed in 2015 in Benghazi. He also attacked the city of Derna with support and direct involvement from the Egyptian Air Force. During these wars, Haftar and his followers committed war crimes against civilians. Mahmoud Warfali, one of Haftar's subordinates, carried out public summary executions in Benghazi. Warfali is now wanted by the International Criminal Court for committing crimes against humanity. Attack on Tripoli. Since 2011, Haftar has not attempted to conceal his intention and ambitions to rule Libya as an ultimate dictator, and to get rid of the fledgling democracy that has been emerging since the overthrow of the Gaddafi regime. His success in controlling the eastern region of the country and the international support he received encouraged him to move on in taking over Tripoli as the final push to achieve his ultimate goal. On February 23 of this year, a meeting was held in Abu Dhabi, UAE, between Fayez el-Sarraj and Khalifa Haftar in the presence of the UNSG Special Representative Ghassan Salama and the U.S. Ambassador to Libya Peter Bode. It was at this meeting that the parties agreed to share the power between Serraj and Haftar. The former would stay on as the head of the Presidential Council and Haftar would become the Minister of Defense and head of the National Security Council. Additionally, the two would share the cabinet assignments 50-50. This agreement was never made public. The UN had planned a national conference that was to be held in the city of Ghadames between April 14 and 16. The purpose of this Ghadames conference would have been to finalize a peaceful solution, establish a roadmap leading to general elections and a transitional government based on the Abu Dhabi formula. However, on March 27, Haftar visited Saudi Arabia and then Egypt. According to the New York Times, he told Saudi Arabia's King Salman about his plan of invading Tripoli and requested support and blessings for his operation. As a result of his visit, the Saudis gave Haftar tens of millions of dollars to support his operation. On the morning of April 4, Libyans woke up to the shocking news that Haftar's militias, the so-called Libyan National Army, were 50 miles away to the south in the city of Garion and positioned to enter Tripoli in an effort to take over the city. Thousands of soldiers, tanks, rocket launchers, artillery, and armed vehicles started marching towards Tripoli. As the news reached Tripoli, the Western and Central Brigades of the Libyan Army of the Government of National Accord immediately pledged to defend the city from the invaders. Furthermore, the armed groups based in Tripoli and Misrata joined them to defend Tripoli. In the following days, Haftar's militia attacked Tripoli from the south in Wadi al-Hira, Azizia, and militias from Terhuna attacked the southeast suburbs of the city. These attacks resulted in hundreds of casualties. Many were killed by the random artillery shelling on densely populated civilian areas in the city. In the last week, there was a massive retreat by Haftar's militia after suffering defeat in many of the battles. Where the international community stands. Since the overthrow of Gaddafi's regime, the international community has played a mixed role in the Libyan scene. Several countries heavily intervened in Libya, among them are the UAE, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia, who have supported Haftar financially and militarily since 2014. On several occasions, the UAE and Egypt were directly involved in military actions in Libya. France has been a staunch supporter of Haftar and has approved his attack on Tripoli. Furthermore, France hosted a meeting between Serraj and Haftar last year, during which they proposed a framework for their collaboration and gave Haftar international legitimacy. Since the attack on Tripoli, France and Russia have played a major role in blocking the UN Security Council and EU from condemning Haftar's attack on Tripoli. For the most part, the United States has stayed on the sidelines, except for statements from the Secretary of State against the military campaign. Recently, there were reports that President Trump called Haftar and thanked him for fighting terrorism and effectively endorsed his offensive against the internationally recognized government in Tripoli. Haftar tried to use the same pretense of fighting terrorism in Tripoli as he did in Benghazi. But Haftar is not fighting terrorism in Tripoli. There is no terrorism in Tripoli. As a matter of fact, the forces of the GNA are the ones who defeated the Islamic State, ISIS, in the city of Sirte in 2017, not Haftar. What are the expected scenarios? The war on Tripoli campaign can take several paths in the coming days and weeks. The war could continue between the two factions with no clear winner. In this case, several scenarios can take place. Both parties could run out of ammunition and arms and the war will become, more or less, a standstill with few skirmishes. At this point, the primary goal would be to hold onto the positions that they have already secured. On the other hand, Haftar supporters, the UAE and Egypt, who were emboldened by Trump's latest position, might use their air forces to attack the GNA forces around Tripoli to give an edge to Haftar's militia on the battlefield. This will result in huge civilian casualties and destruction. The attack on Tripoli will become similar to what has happened in Benghazi. Haftar's forces will obviously lose the battle, so the following might happen. The international community, under pressure from Haftar's allies, will intervene to stop the war before the complete defeat of his forces. The international intervention will not include the condition of Haftar's complete withdrawal from the western region and go back to its original bases. This will give Haftar a position on the ground that will allow him to be a player in any future political solution. Conversely, a major military intervention by his allies may also occur. Currently, most of Haftar's militias are primarily composed of fighters from tribes in the eastern region of the country. These tribes have supported Haftar for several years willingly or otherwise. As of recent, they have started receiving the bodies of their children who were killed in this war, which they were neither consulted on nor supported. This might cause these tribes to withdraw their support and move against Haftar. This will lead to the withdrawal of the fighters, collapse to his campaign, and the end of his role. The war might be played by the separatists as a war between the historical regions of Libya, Barca, Cyrenaica, and Tripolitania. This will lead to the increased tension and the tear of the social fabric, which might lead to the fragmentation and split of the country. This would meet the goal of some of the major countries of the region who have been trying this for a while as part of reshaping the Middle East. This could result in an all-out war for many years to come because of the entangled interests and resources of the country. The most probable outcome is Haftar forces lose the war and his supporters abandon him. This will put him out of the Libyan political and military scene. Most of these scenarios will further complicate the Libyan problem, leading to more bloodshed, destruction and violations of human rights. Haftar will not be able to take over Tripoli regardless of how much support he might get. The only possible way to end this senseless war is if the international community, under the leadership of the United Nations with serious commitments from the United States and United Kingdom, intervenes by forcing Haftar to stop his attack on Tripoli and withdraw the remainder of his forces to their original barracks. The United States clearly needs to re-evaluate its policy towards Libya and support the path to democracy, not to the return of the military rule. Then, the UN can resume its plan to hold the General Conference with a different approach to its attendance, limiting it to only those who are serious about establishing a civil state. The question will remain on whether or not Haftar can be trusted to be a part of any future solution. His previous record shows that he will not abide by any agreement and he will try to take over the country by any means necessary. His latest attack on Tripoli, a few days before the UN conference, which was going to give him a major say in the future of the country, proves that he is not interested in being a power-sharing solution and prefers to have complete control. If the international community continues to stay on the sidelines, watching, and allowing Haftar's international allies to continue providing him with support, this war will continue with no foreseeable end and at a heavy price. The longer it continues, the more likely it is that other regional powers will provide support to the other side. The foreign minister of Algeria announced last week that they would not stand by and watch Tripoli being attacked. President Erdogan of Turkey announced that his country would support the legitimate government of Libya against this attack. In essence, this conflict has the potential to become a proxy war between the conflicting countries in the region, eventually spreading outside of Libya and leading to the destabilization of the entire region. Mustafa Agi Abushagur is the chairman of the Libyan Policy Institute, former Deputy Prime Minister of Libya, 2011-12, and member of the Libyan House of Representatives, 2014.